The land was wide, open, and cruel in its beauty, a desert sea of rolling scrub, mesas like giants at rest, and sky so vast it made a man feel smaller than the dust on his boots, and in that endless expanse lived Samuel Carter, a lonely rancher whose life was carved into routine: wake before dawn, tend the cattle, ride the fence lines, mend what was broken, and collapse into bed beneath the mournful cry of coyotes. But beneath the rhythm of his days lay a hollow place, for Samuel had once been a husband and a father, and the laughter that once filled his cabin had long since gone silent, his wife taken by fever in the spring rains and his son lost 2 winters later when a cough turned into something fiercer, leaving Samuel with nothing but ghosts, land, and cattle, and so he lived on, not because he sought life's sweetness but because each day demanded work, and work had become his only anchor. It was on such a day, with the wind carrying the grit of the desert into his beard and eyes, that Samuel rode out along the north fence line where a section had sagged from a storm, his tools rattling in the saddlebag, his old bay horse plodding steady as though it too had grown weary of life's long road, and as he crested the ridge overlooking a dry wash, he spotted what at first he thought was nothing but another tumble of brush or perhaps the carcass of a jackrabbit, yet something in the shape, too still and too human, tugged at his gaze, and he felt a weight in his chest as he guided the horse down into the wash where the sun beat harsher and the air grew hotter, and there, half buried in dust and shadow, lay a boy, no older than 12, his skin the color of sun-baked earth, his dark hair matted with sweat and blood, his lips cracked, his chest rising shallow as though each breath might be his last, and Samuel knew at once from the beads woven into a torn cord around the boy's neck and the markings on his skin that he was Apache, a child of the very people settlers whispered about in fear and hatred, people Samuel had clashed with before in stolen cattle raids and tense standoffs across dry arroyos, people who had every reason to despise him and every right to strike him down if they found him here, and yet, as Samuel looked at the boy, memories of his own son burned hot and cruel in his mind, of a small chest that had risen in rattling breaths until it did no more, of a fevered hand he had held through the night, of the desperate prayers unanswered, and in that moment Samuel Carter could not see Apache or enemy, only a dying child, and without another thought he swung from his saddle, his boots sinking into the hot dust as he knelt beside the boy, feeling the frailty of his body as he lifted him gently, whispering words the boy could not understand but that Samuel's heart demanded he speak. "You hold on, son, you just hold on." And though he knew the danger, though he knew the Apache would see this act as theft or trespass, though he knew he might be signing his own death warrant, Samuel carried the child to his horse, mounted with the boy cradled against his chest, and turned back toward the lonely cabin that had never known a child's warmth since his own had been taken, the horse's hooves striking a steady drumbeat as though time itself had slowed to mark the weight of the choice he had made, a choice that would echo far beyond the walls of his small homestead and into the heart of the desert, where warriors already sharpened their blades and elders whispered vengeance for a boy they believed lost or slain, a boy who now clung weakly to life in the arms of a rancher too stubborn, too broken, and too human to leave him behind. The ride back to the ranch was long and harsh, the desert sun unrelenting as Samuel pressed the bay horse harder than he should have, the animal snorting with effort as its hooves tore into the sandy trail. But Samuel cared little for weariness, for the boy's breathing was ragged against his chest and every shallow gasp felt like a clock ticking toward silence, and so he whispered encouragement to both beast and child, as if words alone could will them to endure, just a little further, just a little more, until the squat shape of his cabin appeared on the horizon, a lonely square of timber clinging to the land like a man clings to his last hope, and when he finally reached the yard, he slid from the saddle with more urgency than grace, his arms tightening around the boy's frail body, carrying him inside where the smell of wood smoke, leather, and old memories mingled in the dim light. Samuel laid the boy on his own bed, a place that had seen only his own restless tossing for years, and at once he set to work with a kind of desperate determination, heating water, tearing strips from an old shirt for bandages, grinding willow bark into a bitter tea for fever, the motions of a man who had once known the helplessness of watching his own child slip away and who would do anything to keep from watching it happen again. And as he cleaned the boy's wounds, deep gashes along his side, bruises that told of a fall or perhaps a fight, he wondered what had brought the child to that dry wash alone, what cruelty or chance had left him there to die, but the boy was too weak to speak, his eyes flickering open only briefly to show dark pools of confusion, pain, and something else, something Samuel recognized as fear, and in those eyes Samuel saw his son again, not in body but in spirit, the same pleading for life, the same fragile hold on this world. And it hardened Samuel's resolve like iron. Through the night he kept vigil, feeding spoonfuls of water past cracked lips, wiping the sweat from the boy's brow, whispering to him as though words were medicine, "You'll be all right, son, you'll see, just keep fighting." And though the boy did not answer, his chest rose and fell, and that was enough, more than Samuel had dared hope when he first found him. Outside, the wind carried the cries of coyotes and the rustle of mesquite, and Samuel thought of the danger creeping closer with each passing hour, for the Apache would not let this go unanswered. They would search for the boy, and when they discovered he was under the roof of a white rancher, their fury would burn hotter than the desert sun, and Samuel knew this truth in his bones, yet he did not waver, for once a man makes a choice from the heart, fear has no sway over him, and so he worked through the long hours until dawn bled across the horizon, painting the sky in fire and gold, and the boy stirred at last, a faint groan slipping from his lips, his eyes opening wider than before, clearer though still clouded with fever, and Samuel leaned close, speaking softly, "Easy now, you're safe," though he doubted the boy understood, but the child's gaze lingered on him as though trying to measure this strange man, neither friend nor kin, and though no words passed, something unspoken bridged the gap, a fragile bond that would not be easily broken. Yet outside the hills brooded with riders gathering, warriors who had searched for their chief's youngest son for days, finding only tracks that led toward white man's land, and as they pieced together the story, grief twisted into rage, for to them this was no act of mercy but a theft, a trespass against their blood, and vengeance was the only answer they knew. And thus even as Samuel Carter nursed the boy back toward life, the storm of war began to rise, unseen but certain, and it would fall upon his lonely ranch like a hammer upon an anvil, testing whether one man's kindness could stand against the fury of an entire people.